Hey, this is Dead Gamer. This is a video response to the Miniatures Paintbrush, believe it or not. The Miniatures Paintbrush put up a video called Is Terrain Even Important? And I decided, I'm walking on my treadmill, I'm walking on my treadmill right now, and I'm like watching YouTube, and Rob posted this video, and I'm like, I don't want to write a response. I want to make a video response. And I'll just slam that on his comment page and boom, there you go. And you may ask yourself, well, why? Because I have a lot to say about terrain. I love terrain. I think terrain's amazing. One of my favorite parts about the game is putting your figures on a beautiful looking table and creating a environment and a scenario to sort of have a cool skirmish happen or battle happen if you're a big, like, lots of figures. And I think terrain is key to that. When I was younger, the first thing I really got into once I moved from Space Hulk over to 40K was setting up a battlefield. I would get styrofoam, and I'd get those, at the time they were like 50 cents for the big old Michaels, which is an art store, tubes of paint. And I would just paint styrofoam up gray and rip styrofoam up, and yeah, it was I had all this cool styrofoam terrain as a kid, put toothpicks in it for like fence posts and cut the sharp tops off, and a lot of hot glue gun stuff. So I would say most of my gaming life has been playing on 100% painted terrain with 20% painted models. So that probably shows or tells you how important terrain is to me versus painting an army, because armies are expensive, models are expensive, and I know that Games Workshop is now making terrain, and that terrain is also expensive, but that's not what Rob was asking or talking to people about. He was talking about terrain in general, and you know, I think, you know, I know people did the books. They'd lay out a bunch of different levels of books and drape a felt cloth over it, a green or a blanket or whatever they had to make hills and things. But, you know, I think part of getting in the spirit of the game is really buying into the scene that you're playing on and what you're playing for. At least for me it is. Yeah, I think that terrain is a key portion of miniature gaming, at least tabletop board gaming, or tabletop gaming, not board gaming, because board gaming is like Hero Quest. You have a two-dimensional board, which represents a dungeon. You have three-dimensional features that sort of help, you know, but those features can also be two-dimensional, and it's okay. But in a game of miniatures on a table, you know, you need that environment, and I think that sort of breaks up the difference between a board game and a tabletop game. And yeah, it's super key. And Games Workshop stuff is awesome, and I have a lot of it, but it's not necessary by any stretch of the imagination. You know, my personal belief is every army in AOS right now is getting a free terrain feature, and I think that that's, and I'm not one of those people that are like, oh, Games Workshop just wants our money. I mean, okay, it's a business, right? And yes, they need money to continue their business. That is a thing. But I think I think if they made things like the Herdstone or the Deepkin wrecked ship and gave it points, I don't think the sales would be that great. So what I think they're doing is they're putting these things out initially for free, and I believe, you know, maybe 5 years from now, maybe 2 more versions of the game, 1 more version of the game, once they have a pretty good foundation of AOS armies. And I use the rabbit ears because we have a lot of armies that are in limbo right now, and I think they'll start assigning points, because right now if they came out and said, hey, this terrain is X amount of points, people would go out and buy the sized base and create their own version of it and not buy the model. That's a little tangent, but that's my personal feeling on that. But sorry, I've been walking for a good long minute, 5.5 miles, woo! Trying to burn off some of this beer fat, but it doesn't help that while I'm walking, I'm drinking beer. But you know what I said to myself? I said, Dead Gamer, if you just sit and watch YouTube and drink beer and hobby, then you're adding calories. But if you get on a treadmill and you walk, the hell am I walking? 3.1 miles an hour for 5.5 miles so far, you may be burning off some of the beer that you're drinking. And that's a win-win. And I could do that because I got a cool desk set up right here in front of my treadmill. Got my clippers. I've got a big old box of Tomb Kings that I'm going through right now. Can't really see that, but grab a massive chunk of Chariots. Oh, Chariots! Oh, there's a, whatever that thing's called. Oh shit. Whatever that thing's called. The Tomb King thing! He's holding on by his little tooth right now, his saber tooth. Anyway, so I got this dialed in. I'm gonna exercise and hobby and still drink a little bit. And then over time, maybe I'll replace the beer with water. But that's not what this video is about. This video is about terrain. So going back to that, yes, I think terrain is very important. I think it helps reinforce the story of what's going on. It helps people get, and this is all, you know, my perspective, obviously. I can't speak for anyone else. But, you know, I've been to friends' houses and we've done the soda can thing and the Pringles can. And Cheetos do not come in a box, but Cheez-Its do. FYI, Rob. But, you know, even then, with even a rattle can, gray rattle can, you paint a, let's use Cheez-Its. You paint a box of Cheez-Its gray, looks like a giant brick or a giant concrete structure, right? When you're younger and you don't have either time or money, or, you know, a lot of people don't like building terrain. Look at Vince Venturella. He's not a terrain guy at all, but he paints these crazy elaborate models and spends 100% of his hobby time, well, not 100% of it, but the majority, the mass majority of his hobby time working on figures. And I'm sure he does terrain, and I know he's kind of getting more into it, but, you know, he's got a different motivation, right? And, you know, Vince is also a big D&D-er, so he also has a very vivid imagination. He's talked about games he's played in the past, and, you know, he definitely doesn't have an issue putting himself in an environment, in a situation, with whatever he's playing with, be it soda cans or crazy Dwarven Forge dungeon terrain, right? But, you know, for me, personally, I like seeing all this fun stuff, you know, and moving models across these crazy ruins and cruising across rivers. And, you know, maybe people think that stuff's hard to build, and it really truly isn't. If you could paint a miniature, well, if you can assemble a miniature and paint a miniature, you can take some cardboard, some white glue or PVA glue, some cat litter, and I'm not joking, cat litter is amazing. They have a, don't get the scented stuff, buy the cheap cat litter. And if it's too coarse, you just take it, you put it in a couple of plastic bags, you beat it with a hammer, and that stuff just breaks apart into real fine dirt and rubble. And that's what I used to do as a kid. I'd take cat litter, unscented, beat it with a hammer, use that with PVA glue, spray paint to prime it, and then dry brush it with the Michaels paint, the little craft store 50-cent paint. And my stuff looked amazing, and I loved it. My friends loved it. I actually used to kind of sell it. I probably could have sold it for a lot more than, you know, I did, but a lot of my buddies wanted some, and I'm like, well, this takes me time and, you know, material, and they ended up pretty much funding my cat litter and my PVA glue and my paint and my brushes, the little Michaels brushes. So, and as I grew into it more, I used other things, but we're not talking about that. Sorry. So, to me, terrain is very, very important. I don't listen to the person you mentioned. I forgot already who that was, but something about this terrain being a third player in the game. I mean, yeah, it definitely is. It's but that's the nature of tabletop gaming, you know? That's just how that goes. It's not a board game, it's tabletop, and tabletop means you're going to have obstacles, and those obstacles will create, I guess, a third player situation. So, you know, I mean, I guess maybe he was more talking about because that terrain interacts, but then it's just part of your army, you know, and it's sort of like a part of your army that's invulnerable to attacks. So it's like a 2.5 player, because it's I don't really consider it, yeah, it's terrain by the definition, but if you're using it and it's, you know, I don't know. Well, I guess that, yeah, that's a rabbit hole, because you could say, you know, if you still roll for every piece of terrain on your table, and, you know, you've got Mystic, we're talking about AOS now. If you guys are 40Kers or other figure player game guys, probably have no idea what the hell I'm rambling on about. But, yeah, I mean, AOS, you basically, once you establish your battlefield and the look of it, you put out, you roll for each piece of terrain that's on the field, and they could be like mystical or damned, you know, and they've got all these different, I haven't played the game in a while, I'm still dealing with rebuilding my house, but, yeah, so, I guess then, yes, it's sort of third player-y, but, I don't know. But in regular tabletop miniature games, I don't think terrain is a third player by any stretch of the imagination. Maybe in AOS, absolutely, because it has secondary, it has secondary things. Not only as an obstruction of line of sight and movement, but it actually can give or take away something from your unit if it chooses to encroach upon it. So, anyway, like I said, it's 15 minutes now, this would have been a hell of a long message to write you, Rob. So I just decided to do a video response. Thanks, man. Hope you're on your way to get your computer. I hope you got my money for my shirts. I'm looking forward to those. And yeah, brother, you have a great night. And I'm just gonna sit here and walk a couple more miles, finish this beer, keep clipping these Tomb Kings and sorting them, then go to bed. Good night, everybody. Good night, Rob.